Hi, I'm Mike Curtis. I'm the General Manager of Lubricants at CITGO Petroleum Corporation.
So tell me more about CITGO Lubricants as opposed to CITGO the corporation.
Okay, well, CITGO the corporation is a refiner of crude oil into refined products like gasoline, diesel, and kerosene. We have a small business unit, Lubricants, where we go out and buy the raw materials necessary to manufacture, blend, package, market, and sell motor oils, gear oils, hydraulic fluids, and greases.
And what is typically, generally speaking, one of the biggest challenges you face as a general manager for lubricants?
I've been at CITGO Lubricants as their GM now for just over 4 years. We got in to that position just after COVID and during the big supply crunch of 21 and 22. What I discovered in coming into this role was a production manufacturing system that there was no planning. It was a lot of stop and start. Customers being able to call in and dictate when something was coming in. And so the manufacturing plants acted like one of those 1950s newspaper, printing plants. Stop the presses. Everything had to stop at that point, and then we had to reconfigure everything else on that. They were relying very heavily on a 10-day gap report, which was just saying to manufacturing, hey, if you don't manufacture this in the next 10 days, you're going to run out of your finished product supply. And that was all that they had. There was no ability whatsoever to piece together longer runs of manufacturing, blending, to actually use our resources efficiently and effectively. And it was driving our salespeople crazy. It was driving our manufacturing people crazy, and we needed to come up with something for that.
And how did it impact your business, though, like in terms of customer service and inventory and just general challenges, like if you didn't have this visibility?
It was extremely disruptive to not only us, but to our customers as well. We were very fortunate that, we were able to use that model in a time of crisis when we were having the supply chain disruptions, where base oils and additives to make our products were few and far between on the market post-COVID. To be able to stop and get our customers exactly what they wanted. So they looked at us as being extremely flexible to the marketplace relative to our peers, and it actually allowed us to bring in a lot of new business in that time period. However, that's unsustainable. We were losing money on some of those accounts. We were losing money on some of our SKUs. We needed to actually put in place some real strong commercial acumen, and we needed to sort out a supply chain function for ourselves. We did not have a supply chain function until we engaged with you at Reveal, and you helped us build that.
No supply chain for a 100-year-old business and subsidiaries. Tell me about that. Like how did you guys function without this end-to-end visibility?
Hand to mouth. It was strictly hand to mouth. We were not using any of the MRP resources that we had within SAP. Great procurement team who would always try to fall over themselves to get what we needed. Our suppliers, knew us as someone who was coming in haphazardly, always asking for something and moving things around and expediting deliveries. But we did not have that at all. It was a sales-driven process in manufacturing, just trying to catch up with sales, with nothing that was able to link the commercial side of the business to the supply chain side of the business, because that function just did not exist.
How costly was that to the business?
In respect of customer satisfaction, I think it was very costly for us. We had a heck of a lot of inventory that was just sitting there. Something that we were able to use your services to bring down, our inventory dramatically. So we were just not an effective and efficient business. We made money, but we were leaving a lot on the table, and allowing our customers to be satisfied based upon just the whims of the marketplace and our ability to firefight.
So obviously day-to-day real challenges, maybe even monthly, quarterly, etc. How scalable do you think you were based on the current state back then?
On a scale of 1 to 10, maybe a 0. Yeah, there was no way for us to be able to retain the business that we had and also grow the business that we see ourselves being able to perform without actually getting our production planning in place, talking between the sales team and now our supply chain function, managing demand. Without actually being able to do that, we would have continued to lose ground once our competitors actually were able to get their raw material situation fixed.
Okay, and so now take it back to the human side of it. How did it impact your people? Like, were they just exhausted at the end of the day?
That's exactly right. Prior to us starting this supply chain transformation, our people were just working themselves crazy. For instance, in the plants, we had overtime that was just out of this world. We especially were having fatigue issues in Cicero, which is one of our facilities outside Chicago. In that instance, there was so much overtime that if you wanted it, you could get it. But now most people had already put in enough time and already had a little extra money in their pocket that they didn't want it anymore. And that's a union shop, so it was the junior personnel who couldn't turn down overtime under the collective bargaining agreement, and we were really starting to get worried about their ability to stay focused on the job, get rested, and make sure that there was no safety incidences just due to the wear and tear that we were putting onto our people.
Yeah. And overwork people, overstress people, safety is an issue. How important is safety to CITGO?
Safety is our number one priority. Absolutely. Productivity can stop if it means that, we have to do so to make sure that we are safe, not just for our own individual employees, but for the stakeholders in our community and the environment as well.
And how much is safety at risk when people are reacting and, as you said, they're just trying to get the orders out to make the customers happy based on that reactionary state that they're in?
There's a direct correlation between production planning and orderly business in the plants and safety, right? For instance, early on in my tenure, we had an incident where an individual was rushing over to a pail line that was overfilling, and he slipped and fell, and it was luckily it was just a first aid incident, but it could have been much worse. If we have proper production planning and schedule, there's not someone trying to rush around trying to figure out what they're going to do on this line or on that line. They know exactly what they're going to do all day long. It's already been presented to them in their morning meetings. We don't have to worry about them trying to do the best that they can, but exposing themselves to a slip, trip, or fall situation.
So obviously, not having this visibility end to end, not having a full supply chain structure in place, having this production reactionary kind of state, and not necessarily having the systems in place to support it other than this gap report, what were you looking for as a solution?
Well, first, our head of manufacturing and I wanted to solve that production planning process. And, in our minds, it was something as simple as just go out and get a new system that has production planning. We're an SAP shop, and really we started looking at other systems outside of SAP to tack on to SAP or use on the other side of SAP. And that's really what we were thinking that we needed to have. Fortunately, I had an opportunity to meet with a retiree from a close competitor of ours in a networking situation. And I started talking to him about some of the difficulties and challenges that we had, and that we were going to get some production planning software, and that was going to be the solution to all of our problems.
Right.
This individual happened to have used Reveal services at the competitor, and he said, well, hold on a minute. You don't want just another system tacked on to another system. You need to be thinking about people, processes, as well as the technology. And if you already have SAP, man, that's a great tool right out of the box. You just need to know how to use it. So he gave us your details, and we called you up and asked you to come on down and pitch what your services were to us. And that's how we got exposed to Reveal for the first time.
And what made you think that SAP couldn't do it?
Well, it just we hadn't used it in the past, you know, and I mean the modules were just not even turned on, and we just never even really thought of it.
Right.
You know, I'm an operations guy by training, you know, and background. I'm not a supply chain, you know, guy, and without having a proper supply chain function and leader in that role, you know, there was a lot of stuff that we really didn't know. We did not know that SAP could be the solution.
So we came in, we did an assessment for you guys. It was a pretty brief one, right? But it was in and out, data centric, and presented you with the results. And then
I was surprised at how quick it was. I mean, I think if it
let's
was,
talk about that. Yeah.
I mean, I think you guys came in and it was 7, you know, 10 business days that you already had assessment to us, and you know, it was amazing how much you were able to learn about us in such a short period of time.
And what did it mean to you? Like, how did it suddenly just give you the sense like there is some value in the system that we have? Like,
At first, you know, there was no real surprise, right? You came in and told us what I had already basically known. Our system's not working. We needed production planning. We needed demand management. And more importantly, on a scale of 1 to 5, you placed us very low in our maturity of supply chain. That's exactly what I expected to see. The only real surprising at that point was that you guys actually put us a little bit higher than I was expecting out of that. You know, and so I thought that maybe at that point you were just trying to make sure that, hey, look, there is something to grow. There's a foundation for us to grow on. So that was a nice bit. But I did at that point, you know, it was easy for me to recognize that you understood us. You knew where our problems were. You emphasized very, very much that, you know, we needed to get into our people's heads that were working within supply chain, whether we call them supply chain or not, and actually give them the theory and the practical understanding about how to do their jobs. And that was right there. That was the selling point.
so from that, the results of that assessment, what was, from a leadership perspective, business leadership perspective, what was the biggest aha or challenge that came to you that gave you some perspective that you may not have been aware of?
That our people didn't know what to expect to come through because, you know, like I mentioned, you know, we have been operating a supply chain company without really any supply chain fundamentals. They didn't know not only how to use the system, but actually how to be thinking through the process. So I knew that educating and getting our folks, you know, to understand and appreciate that their job was going to change was going to be the biggest challenge for us.
And out of that came a roadmap. It said, okay, Mike, here's the next 5 things we need to do to get us from A to B, to get you up on that scale of maturity. How did you internally justify a initiative like this, the transformation?
Sure, I because I knew we were not going to be successful in transforming our entire business as CITGO Lubricants. We in the past have been very much volume driven, and we were, you know, trying to emphasize that we would now be value driven. And to do that, you know, you not only need to convince your customers of the value of your product, but you also need to put in line your business behind the scenes in the plants and the supply chain so that you can actually compete in the marketplace productively and competitively, so that, you know, we were around the very next day. If we weren't going to actually adopt all of that roadmap that you were talking about, I knew, you know, this business was going to be on, you know, would not be around for the next 100 years.
Wow. So longevity, scalability, profitability was actually at the heart of you saying we need to do something.
That's correct. That plus, like we talked about a little earlier, the safety of our employees, making sure that they weren't running around an oil plant trying to produce what just happened to pop up on a 10-day gap report that day.
Okay, so clearly from a business perspective, it made sense. You needed to do it for longevity and profitability perspective. In your mind, I know you as a person, you really care for your people. What did it mean to them? Like what could have done, what does this do for them in their day-to-day and even their livelihood going forward?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we're not a supply chain function. We're a bunch of individuals working on, you know, siloed jobs in there, without them being able to truly understand how the supply chain worked. Some of them were very experienced individuals within the oil and gas business, but not seeing how we went from raw materials all the way to, the production and order management and the like. So what this opportunity presented through either the PAT, some of our, leaders on the PG team presented for them was career opportunities for them. It was an education in not just the fundamentals of how our business worked, but also how to best run an entire supply chain that was transferable to, any other department within CITGO or to companies outside of even our industry. So I think it was very exciting for them to understand that we were investing in them as much as we were investing in our own business.
And do you think they saw that and felt that excitement when it began?
Some very much did. Absolutely, they did. I think those who had worked at other places that had what was much more mature within supply chain, they got it like that.
Right.
Other individuals that have grown up within CITGO for many, many years, I think they looked at it and said, wow, you're changing my job. I'm going to have to learn all new skill sets. I'm going to have to learn theory. In fact, actually, we then told them that not only are you going to have to learn theory, you're going to be tested on the theory. And I think there was a lot of individuals who were very nervous about the change when we first laid it out.
How did you feel about going into it? So obviously it's big for them, for some, but how did it affect you? Like, did you have any apprehension going into it or mostly excitement?
No, I did not have any apprehension. I was full of excitement. My wife likes to tell me that I love change unless it's not at the house. So I was very excited about it. I came in as a change agent. I wanted to improve this business. I wanted to make it profitable for the parent company. And so here was an opportunity for me I thought, an opportunity that we would be able to just knock this out of the park as long as we were dedicated and trust the process.
Okay, that sounds easy. It wasn't easy.
No, it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy at all. It's easy for me to adopt the vision. It's easy for me to actually try to explain to the vision to individuals, but now you're asking individuals to change what they do every single day that they've been doing it that way for 10 some odd years or so. And there was some resistance that happened. We used, a whole lot of carrots and cajoling, trying to explain to them that this is going to be something that is hard now, but it's going to make your life so much easier. All that breakback work that you had to be doing in the past just to keep us in production, now let the system do it, which leads to another point. They had to actually become comfortable with trusting what the system told them to do. Everything for them had to be manual. So it was all individual contributors who said, I know how to do my job, and who now were afraid, where we were saying, trust what the theory says, trust what SAP says for you to do. You will be okay as long as you follow the process.
So if you think of what you've just said, it sounds like it's an easy step to go from A to B, but it's not. Tell us how the people experienced that change and what were some of the challenges they were facing around trusting the system, trusting the data, trusting things that they never had to do before.
Well, you said it. They've never had to do it before. So 10 years or so into their career lately, they've been doing this all exactly the same way, using their own minds and their own Excel sheets that they built themselves. Now we're asking them to trust what SAP tells them. They were really uncomfortable, I think, unless they were able to get deep into the weeds of what SAP was telling them, and it actually started telling them the same things that they would have done naturally themselves. So what we found for a while is that some of our individuals were doing their work twice. So here we were telling them, this is going to make your life better. It's going to make your life easier. You're not going to have to run around as such. You don't have to come in early in the morning to do the production planning for the plant and stay later in the evening to get the finished products ready to go out the door the next day. And then they actually said, great, but then they didn't trust it enough. So now they're actually putting in more hours in there, doing it in SAP because we tell them to have to do it in SAP, but them saying, I still need that security blanket of the way I did it, and doing it in their Excel spreadsheets, and they were keeping it close to their chests the entire time. And so they're doing the work twice, once in SAP, and then because they still need that security blanket, they're still doing it in Excel, and they're working themselves to death at the very beginning because they just needed to get some more experience and some more time just so that they can then go home at the end of a regular day.
So fundamentally, it sounds like they had to learn to let go. But to do that, you really need that level of confidence to do so. How critical was the educational component of the program for your people to really get to that level of saying, I can now trust
Oh, it was
the
paramount.
technology?
It was paramount. The training and education that Reveal had to provide to them to give them the fundamental understanding of what was going on within SAP system, to actually have them understand the logic of it and how it all works. Without that, they could never look at SAP other than just a black box. So without all of the various efforts that your people put in, getting them ready to test on that certification exam really was the tipping point on the success of the project long term.
And how do adults feel about being tested?
They
So-
don't like it at all. I mean, we certainly had opportunities where some of our employees came in and said, I haven't taken an exam in 20 years, and now you want me to take an exam? Am I going to be fired if I don't get the right score? And we had to explain to them that, no, this is not anything about keeping a job or not. This is all about making sure that you have the skill sets, the talents to be able to be successful in a modern supply chain functioning company.
And as a business leader, does it help you figure out for the folks that actually have the skills and are able to do it versus those that just don't want to change? Did it give you some sense of understanding how well your team is cohesively trying to make this better?
Well, that process, the education process and the certification exam process, certainly identified for us some rock stars that we didn't know that we had. Found out that they were really passionate about supply chain, that that they loved the work that they were doing. And it allowed us then to deploy those resources on side projects and keep them more engaged and happier at work. There were some individuals that you identified through the process that just weren't getting on board. And we worked with them on coaching, and it has taken time. I think most of them are there now. We were very fortunate. We didn't lose any personnel throughout the entire education process, and then the rolling out of the graphical user interface tools. And we kept them all around. We got them there. But some just took a lot longer to get there. But that should be considered normal in any situation where you're changing something as big as your day-to-day.
One of the things that the team tries to introduce so that the business leadership like yourself actually gets to see firsthand whether the team's actually getting better or not is a bi-weekly feedback session. We call it B2B.
B2B.
How did you experience that, and how beneficial was it for you to hear what they're learning and doing about it, and then the feedback you could give them? How did that cycle improve just maybe the cohesiveness of the team and just you generally from a leadership point of view?
For me, from a leadership point of view, the B2B was a real journey for me. At first, when we started going to executive governance meetings, and the B2B team came in and said, this is what we're learning about, this is what we've done, this is the cleanup that we've done to our master data. It seemed to me like it was just a cheerleading session for me and my executive team to be cheering on the team, and you're doing great, keep going on, yay, so glad to hear all this stuff. And then they'd go off and we would have our executive governance meeting, and after a while it started to seem like, okay, we're just cheerleading. What is the benefit of this B2B if I'm just cheerleading always? And eventually, the PAT came on their own to these B2Bs with their own ideas, with their own concepts and thoughts and improvement suggestions that had nothing to do with, well, we learned this in Reveal today. Or we have cleaned up, 80% of the master data, so we've met this milestone. They were coming up with very creative ideas that were benefiting the business, benefiting themselves. And it wasn't until that moment where I realized that this is an actual very helpful process to the rank and file as they're learning a new way of doing things. I'll be honest, I was there for a while saying, as soon as Reveal's gone, B2B is out the door. But it was when they started to make that turn and actually making B2B as something that they were proud to present these new ideas, that I said, no, we're going to have to keep B2B well after Reveal is gone, because this is keeping them engaged and proud of the work that they do.
And I think in many ways it speaks to them transforming, like physically changing the way they do business. I want to talk a bit about that specifically because one of the challenges, you mentioned it earlier, was if many people have been doing it for 30 years a certain way. Talk to me a bit about if you have a particular example that comes to mind of where you've seen a person or a group of people being able to let go of something and go, some aha moments that they've had where they can actually see the light at the other side of the tunnel.
We had several individuals that had a hard time. I can particularly remember a production planner up in Cicero who was really challenged with moving to the SAP tools that we gave them. And the funny thing is that this individual had actually worked at another company that is one of our suppliers and had used those exact same production planning tools in SAP that you were trying to have our group learn and do. But once she came over to CITGO and didn't have that tool, necessity is the mother of all invention. So she created her own Excel spreadsheets on how to do production planning all on her own. And here we are now introducing the tool that she had been using previously in her career, and she was not willing to take it because she's already so reliant on these Excel spreadsheets and doing things for her own self that it took a lot of time with her going forwards 1 step, backwards 3 step, forward 1 step, backward 4 steps. So almost going negative, that we had to literally just say to the group, not to any one individual, is that this is Mike Curtis talking. This is the GM of the business. If you do what the system tells you to do, if you use the system and it's wrong, you're indemnified. You will not get in trouble for following the system. Now, if you choose not to use the system, when we've given you all the tools, that's when we're going to need to start having serious conversations about why it is that you're not willing to get on the bus.
And how did that turn out?
Well, for most people, it turned out very, very well. For this individual and one other individual in our Oklahoma City, we still have to provide reminders from time to time, but they understand it. They do get it. Every once in a while, though, someone who's been doing it for 30 years still just reflexively kicks in, and we just have to, coach them on that. But if out of a team of 30 some odd individuals, only 2 of them need reminding every once in a while, I think is a pretty good success rate.
So Mike, tell me, how does this set you up foundationally for your future, whether it's moving to the latest S/4HANA SAP systems or just fundamentally your day-to-day operations?
Well, it is certainly within CITGO Petroleum Corporation's plans to move to S/4HANA. And I do believe that the fact that we're now using SAP's production planning, demand management the way we're supposed to be using it, we are well set up for using all the benefits that S/4HANA is going to bring us. It also means that we didn't have to ditch one software system brand new and learn it all over again. So we're very well positioned there. As for CITGO Lubricants business itself, we have used this opportunity of transforming our supply chain organization to moving much of our product and orders from made to order to made to stock. So that is making us much more competitive and turning around and improving on our OTIF numbers and our lead times to our customers to make sure that we retain, our business, our customers in a very, very competitive business.
Now, often when people make that move, they tend to see a rise in inventory, right? Because we're making more inventory, right? But was that the case for you guys?
Quite the contrary. Inventory didn't go up at all. In fact, our dead stock inventory reduced by 46% in just the time that we've been working with you.
So obviously your dead stock's coming down, inventory is right sizing, and turns are improvement. Tell me more about that.
Our turns are up 56% since we started with Reveal, which has been fantastic. It's great for capital efficiency. I carry less inventory. I have to replace the inventory that much less frequently. Our CFO now has millions of dollars more that he can apply to other areas within the business, or even pay down any more of the debt if that's what they choose to do.
How does it impact the profitability for the...
Naturally, if you can actually increase your turns, reduce your inventory, profitability is going to follow.
So obviously, as part of turns, improvement is the right sizing of inventory, obviously making the right thing at the right time for the right reason. Tell me a bit about how your inventory is reduced.
Our inventory has gone down 31 million since we started working with you.
So as your turns are increasing, obviously there's an impact on trying to keep up with market demand, but also your average inventories are reducing. Tell me about that.
Yeah, our average inventory has reduced by 31% since we started working through the transformation with you at Reveal.
And 31% in inventory reduction is actually freeing up all this working capital. What are you doing with that?
That's being reinvested in other areas in the business. We've been able to, within CITGO Lubes ourselves, is invest highly in our very profitable grease business by putting in money into grease kettles and contactors and palletizers and all other stuff that actually make us even more efficient, not just on the planning side of business, but on the productivity side of business.
So one of the challenges many leaders like yourself face is that they have to spend 10 to save 100. How did you reconcile that? Because there's a lot of effort and energy and money that goes into this initiative.
You're right. It is often difficult to justify to yourself, do I have that $10 million right now in my pocket that I know that once I put into the business is going to return $100 million to the business? And that takes some courage to be able to actually do that. I think at CITGO Lubricants, we were fortunate enough that we have a very supportive executive team that looks at the lubricants business as something that's profitable and underperformed in the past. We have brought in a whole new leadership team. You met Sayani. She is someone, who got the trust of our executive team with what we're doing and what our vision is. And so they agreed with us that this is the right thing, that for us to be competitive, to be around for the next 100 years, this was a no-brainer.
If you had to give advice to a peer in even a different industry completely, and they're struggling with this idea that I got to spend 10 to save 100,
right?
What advice would you give them to give them the courage to make that decision?
Well, for starters, there's one way to look at it. From my perspective, as a batch manufacturer, I could look at it as what's my cost to produce, and this is going to bring down my cost to produce to cover the cost of the investment that's in there. And I think, frankly, you can do that. That's kind of sometimes hard to be able to put your thumb on it exactly, that says that this project A is going to cover its costs in that in the raw material element or in the manufacturing number of man hours that I need to put on that. It's very hard at that time to really just say, okay, how do I differentiate this from anything else that's going on in the marketplace? What you need to do is to be able to make this decision is look at it from a value creating perspective. We had assets that were underutilized that if we could get our if we can get our business in order, we would be able to actually take the assets that we have, increase the throughput on it, and get an ROA on that was easy to convince to executives and peers that this was a really good decision for CITGO Petroleum.
And speaking of ROA, I mean, one of the challenging things is people don't necessarily see SAP as an asset. So if you're underutilizing an operational asset, the first thing you want to do is increase capacity.
That's correct.
Right? And utilization. What made you realize that SAP was this asset that was so underutilized, and how did you then reconcile that that's going to bring you this value?
Oh, well, that was an easy calculation to do, trying to figure out what the ROA of using SAP is yourself, but actually using it correctly versus going out and buying a whole new system. In this case, all we had to do was buy the expertise to teach us how to use the system that we needed versus going out and actually giving licensing costs and implementation costs that are necessary for a whole new system, which ultimately doesn't teach you how to use the system in the first place. Okay,
so that you must have taken then a pretty big leap of faith to get to this point of value mindset when you realized that you had to jump in a partnership with Reveal. Like, what gave you this confidence?
Well, in the past, I've had other projects where I have jumped into a bed with a systems-based person. And those projects haven't gone very, very well. What Reveal did when they came in is did not focus much at all on the system. They were focused on the people and the process. Now, I can put a lot more faith in people and in process than I can in systems. And so you were speaking my language at that point, and it seemed to make sense to me that Reveal was the right choice.
So obviously, quite a lot of results came from this initiative, returning cash back to the balance sheet, reducing inventories and turns improvement, productivity, etc. How confident are you that these are sustainable, and have you seen sustainability from these results?
With respect to the sustainability of the benefits that we've seen from our supply chain transformation, I am completely convinced that these are sustainable for near term and into the far term. And I can say that with quite confidence because since Reveal has finished up their work with us day to day inside our plants and inside our offices and have gone off on, to other projects, we have not only kept what Reveal has been able to help us with, but we've actually improved on that. So our dead stock has continued to fall after Reveal left. Our turns have continued to increase after Reveal left. Inventory is down since Reveal left. So the PGT, the individuals who were managers of individual siloed pieces have come together and really gelled and now have taken control of running our operations on a day-to-day basis, something that we weren't seeing them willing to do in the past. It's been ingrained in our culture.
So Mike, obviously there's some hardcore real metrics that were gained from this. Everything from inventory to cost savings to profitability to scalability. Give me a sense of some of the intangibles that you gained from this initiative.
I have two examples that I can give to you that were intangible benefits from this initiative. The first one was not long after we got through the education portion of the process. I received a phone call from one of our strategic suppliers out there who said, Mike, what's going on? It's amazing. Your order pattern has become from haphazard to one that we could depend on and we can understand. And we told them about the supply chain transformation that we were going through with Reveal. And they said, whatever it is you're doing, keep doing it. And then it was about 4 or 5 months later, I was off at what we call our marketer council. It's an advisory board of some of our most strategic customers who have the voice of all of our customers that have come through. And they said to us, we don't really know what it is, but in the last 5 or 6 months, your deliveries have become much more dependable. What is it that's going on? And so we actually talked to them about the supply chain transformation and the work that we've done with Reveal. In fact, one of our customers then took your contact details, and called you up to see if they could actually use your services in Oklahoma.
So Mike, it sounds like this was pretty transformative to you guys. Would you do this again though, even though it was so difficult?
Without hesitation, knowing the difficulty that we had to get over a couple humps, the returns have just outperformed everything that we ever expected for a supply chain transformation in record time. So I would do this again without hesitation.
So tell me more about your level of trust in Reveal, maybe from the beginning, and has it changed, and where is it now?
Well, from the very beginning, I was able to trust Reveal from having such a great referral from one of my past competitors who came to me and said, this just transformed their business and you should be looking at it too. That trust continued to build with the degree of care and excellence that your team at Reveal showed to my people and to my executive team in turning this business around. And then lastly, as for trust going forward, I have already recommended Reveal to some of my customers. So I have no doubt whatsoever that Reveal is going to be someone who, we will be able to call in the future for our next step in the transformation process.
So if you were speaking to peers outside of your industry, would you recommend Reveal?
I would absolutely recommend Reveal. But more importantly, I'd also recommend them to trust the process that Reveal goes through. It's a hard process. It's one that, it's going to transform your entire business. But it's one that if you trust the process and you trust Reveal who goes along with you, you're going to get the returns well beyond what you're expecting.